Welcome back to the Health Longevity Secrets Show with your host, Dr. Robert Lufkin. His soon-to-be-released book, titled Lies I Taught in Medical School, has been an Amazon bestseller for 14 weeks in a row, and the #2 best-selling book on longevity. If you are enjoying this program, please like, subscribe, or leave a review. It will help others to learn about our work. And now, please enjoy this week's episode with Grace Price and her new documentary.
Hey everybody, I'm Dr. Robert Lufkin. When Grace Price watched Fed Up, a documentary that exposed the unsettling truths behind our diet, it ignited a spark within her that grew into a fierce crusade for metabolic health awareness. At just 18 years old, this visionary filmmaker is now steering the conversation with her own project, Cancer, a Food-Borne Illness. Grace has allowed us to include the full 20-minute documentary at the end of this interview, so stay tuned to watch the whole thing for yourself. But before we do, the episode kicks off with Grace's critique of the mainstream health narrative and her ambitious goal to educate others on the pivotal role diet plays in the development of chronic diseases. Our discussion weaves through unsettling statistics of rising cancer rates among young adults and the daunting influence of big food corporations on our health. Navigating the maze of nutritional science can be daunting, especially for teens who are often caught up in a tug of war between inherited eating habits and the temptation of convenience foods. Grace and I dissect the misconceptions clouding carbohydrates and underscore the critical need for a dietary focus on fats and proteins for metabolic fortitude. We confront the formidable task of redefining what healthy eating truly means and offer guidance for young listeners eager to scrutinize their food choices more critically. It's a conversation that lays bare the challenges of shifting dietary paradigms and the empowerment that comes with understanding the substance of what lands on our plates. The episode concludes with a deep dive into the pressing need for a revolution in medical research funding, with an emphasis on prevention and the role of diet in disease treatment. Grace shares the positive waves her film is creating, signaling a shift in awareness among her peers towards the importance of diet in maintaining health. We also touch on the potential for the restaurant industry to join this health movement by ditching harmful seed oils. As we wrap up, Grace's commitment to her cause shines through, and we invite you to check out her websites and follow her journey as she continues to advocate for a healthier future. And we conclude by including the episode, we include Grace's full documentary, Cancer, a Food-Borne Illness, at the end of the interview. So please stick around and enjoy the whole thing. I'm proud to be hosting this summit as 25 world-class anti-aging experts reveal new science and breakthroughs you can use today to reverse the aging process in every aspect of your life. The free virtual summit starts June 20th, 2024. Please click on the link in the show notes to reserve your spot. This episode is brought to you by L Nutra, maker of the Prolong fasting mimicking diet. If you'd like to try it, use the link in the show notes for 20% off. And now, please enjoy this week's episode. Hey, Grace, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Lufkin.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here today and talk about your amazing film project and the work that you're doing. But before I do, I'm going to ask you a question that I've never asked any of my guests before on this program at all. And that is, do you have your parents' permission to be on the show?
I do actually. So thank you for asking.
We talked to your dad. No, but you are 17 years old, correct?
I recently just turned 18. Yeah.
You were 17 when you did the video. Yeah. Okay, so we don't need your permission anymore then. But let's just start off. Your story is so exciting and so compelling. I want everyone to hear it from you. Maybe tell us how you came to this space and how you got to be so interested in this.
Yeah, no, I would love to. I mean, honestly, I always say that it started way back in like sixth grade when my parents first showed me the documentary Fed Up, which opened my entire mind to the idea that obesity, which was a disease I knew kind of us as Americans struggled with, could be connected to the foods that we eat and actually caused by that. Specifically, the overconsumption of sugar and carbohydrates. And so that was really interesting to me because I had never really heard that before. Sure, I knew that, eating foods that people said were unhealthy could maybe make you fat or something, but I didn't realize that obesity actually could be totally traced back to our diet. So I started to then be a little bit obsessed with reading nutritional labels, and I would get so excited to tell my parents' friends about how sugar's super bad for you. Like that was my favorite thing when I was in middle school. But then I kind of fell off, and I didn't really find my way back to this whole health passion that I have until I lost someone in my own life to cancer. And so when I did, I kind of remembered some books that I had been recommended by my dad. And I read actually Deep Nutrition by Dr. Kate Shanahan over the summer of my um, freshman year of high school. So, like before my sophomore year. And after reading that book, I was introduced to the term epigenetics, which basically is how our environment and lifestyle can impact the expression of our genes through these chemical tags that can be altered. So they're not permanent like our DNA. And so when I learned about that, I was like, this is really interesting. Like, this same thing that I was really excited about when I was in middle school seems to still exist. Like, our environment impacts us on the cellular level. And I'm a huge biochemistry nerd. Like, after taking AP biology, I was like, okay, I can totally go read some papers and not be like, this is the bane of my existence. So I started to wonder, like, okay, well, then does our environment have any impact on things like, I don't know, cancer? These big bad diseases that we're really never encouraged to ask those questions. Like we're just told, it's genetic or it's caused by an accumulation of DNA damage over time. And that's why you get this disease. And to most people, all they really hear is it's out of my control. So we have this very passive approach to health because no one really thinks that they can control whether they get these diseases that they believe are due to aging and random mutations. So then I started reading about whether epigenetics and our diet are connected to cancer, and I found the craziest stuff. Dr. Lufkin, you would not believe it. It completely blew my mind. And what was most crazy to me is that the biggest epidemic we're seeing in young adults getting cancer right now, it's risen 80% in the past 3 decades in people under the age of 50, is totally due to the fact that we have completely wrecked our metabolic health. All of us. And in my generation, it is the most evident that our poor metabolic health has led to this skyrocketing effect of all these different chronic diseases. Yet no one is talking about it. And they treat each disease in silo. And they say, especially with cancer, they're like, no, that's not something that's connected to metabolic health. But when you look at the research, there's actually a ton of incredible stuff that people like Professor Seafried or Dr. Nasha Winters, all of these different amazing doctors, professors have shown actually has metabolic origin when you look at these different studies. So there's a lot of really crazy stuff out there. And it just blew my mind that we know this and no one's talking about it, especially to my generation, who are the people who are the number one targets of these big food companies. We are the reasons they are able to make so much profit. It's $2 billion that goes into commercials that advertise these big food conglomerates products and drinks to all of us. And so I honestly decided I had to make a documentary because I didn't know what else to do. Like I would have physically exploded not being able to share this with as many people as possible. So that's what kind of got me going on, okay, I'm going to do this documentary. Sure, the title's a little provocative, cancer, a food-borne illness, but at a time when we're told that cancer is a genetic disease, sometimes you need, that big message that catches people's eyes where they're like, wait, have I been thinking about this disease wrong the whole time? Could there be more to the story than what my doctors and dietitians have led me to believe? So that is ultimately the goal of my documentary. It's to get people to question whether these beliefs that they've had their entire life about how to approach health and how much control they have over their health are actually valid or not.
Yeah, this is this is so important. And Grace has, as we mentioned earlier in the intro, has graciously allowed us to include the documentary at the end of this interview. So if you want, those of you who are on video can stay and watch it. If not, we'll link to her website and you can see it there as well. But before we dive into some of the motivations and things for why these things are happening, what you mentioned a metabolically healthy lifestyle. What does that mean? What what does that involve?
Yeah, so metabolic health is a funny thing because to a lot of people it almost seems like an abstract concept because they don't typically spend a ton of time reviewing, high school biology where you learn about mitochondria and how important it is to keep your mitochondria healthy if you want to make sure that you are having proper energy balance in your body. And ultimately, like you mentioned so well in your book, I mean, our body's goal is to survive. Our cells just want to survive. And so energy is super important because that is how all of these processes work. And so when we are metabolically unhealthy, we are not using the food that we're getting to do all of these things correctly in a way that is actually going to benefit us health wise or give us good energy. So it's how I like to think of it is like bad energy versus good energy, which is very different from how I think the mainstream dietary narrative likes to think about it. They think about it in calories. So they're just like, food is energy, eat food, or don't eat food if you don't want to have any energy and you want to lose weight. It's like this whole idea where calories, make you fat or something. Then if you stop eating them, they don't, which just isn't really true because that's not how these foods, one, are metabolized. The macromolecules are all different whenever we digest them. We have carbohydrates, which are non-essential, but many people like to believe are essential because we've been told that our whole lives. And the actual, if you look at the myplate.com, they show you that carbohydrates need to make a huge percentage of your plate. So of course people think, oh yeah, it's essential because why else do we need that much of it? So there's that going for us. But then we have the two essential ones, which is fat and protein. And these are the very things that, we're not really prioritizing. And so when we look at our diets, we are totally overrunning our mitochondria and we are damaging it as well with all of these kind of inflammatory molecules too, because we're consuming these ultra processed foods. They make up greater than 60% of our diets. And they have things like chemical additives, preservatives, stabilizers, emulsifiers, dyes, all of these different additives that totally damage our cells, our DNA, and they can harm our mitochondria and just cause chronic inflammation. And the number one thing that I also like to bring up to people is, we are made to handle acute stress. Our body can do that. If you get a cut, it can heal itself. And it's miraculous that our cells are able to do this. But we were not made to handle chronic stress. And that is when our bodies are constantly under a state of having to deal with all of this inflammation that it can't really deal with. And then that's why when you see, oxidative stress being a hallmark of cancer, you're like, oh, so it is connected. So it's all of these things, but ultimately it's like, are we keeping our mitochondria healthy? That's how I think of metabolic health. And I don't think any teens really think of that right now. So I'm trying to bring it to them, but it's hard. Let me tell you, it's a hard thing to try to translate.
Yeah, I mean, you have a particular challenge with your age and your community that you're living in with teenagers, basically. I have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old daughter. I know how tough it is to make these dietary choices. And what kind of response are you finding from your classmates, from your peers? What are the challenges you face with this? What's the pushback?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest pushback is that their parents had all of these beliefs about nutrition that they then passed on to them. So one, you have to deal with that where they think, "Oh, if I want to eat healthy, I just need to go eat a salad." Which yes, I have nothing against salads, but that's not one just eating, salads all day. Maybe a vegan diet works for some people, but that's not the only way, to eat healthy. So they have that idea in their mind. And then because of that, they find it super unattainable. And ultimately, they believe that these ultra processed foods are totally an okay replacement for food, which being able to equate these fake foods with real food is just absolutely absurd and ridiculous, because no one would ever say that eating cardboard gives you the same amount of nutritional value as eating an avocado or chicken or broccoli, any of these different things that we know actually give us essential nutrients that our bodies need. And so whenever you've been raised your entire life to believe that these are foods, because I mean, I've been talking about this so much lately, but I mean, the minute we're born, we're giving baby formula, which has the number one source of fat in that is vegetable oils, which is just awful because these contain polyunsaturated fats that are easily oxidized. They can turn into peroxides, all of these super harmful chemicals that then can wreak havoc in our cells. And then whenever we're older, we're in high school and we're drinking Gatorade and all of eating Doritos, and all of these have food dyes, crazy stuff. And so, I mean, I honestly, I'm at a loss for words, because in my mind, it's so black and white now that I have gone through this whole journey of research, because I'm like, one is food and one isn't food. It shouldn't be a question of whether we eat one or the other, but it is. So the first step when I talk to my friends is I'm like, let's just talk about what you eat in a day and what you think is in that versus what's actually in that. Because teens don't even look, no one looks at the nutritional labels. Teens barely even read things anymore because they're on TikTok all day. The quickest way for them to consume information is a 5-second video. So definitely not going to take a look at the back of their Sprite to see how much sugar's in that. So I think that finding ways to inform them and be like, hey, let's think about this is a good start, especially when it has to do with scaring them a bit. Because one thing I've noticed about teens is that they don't think smoking is cool. They think that's awful. If you ask any of my friends, do you smoke? Do you know anyone who smokes? They're like, no, I don't smoke. Like, we're not into that. Smoking cigarettes is super bad. It gives you cancer. But if you ask them, so when's the last time you drank a Gatorade? They're like, oh, I had one the other day. And you're like, do your friends drink that? Like, yeah, why wouldn't we? That's normal. So there's not that same stigma around these foods, even though there's a wealth of evidence that's showing they actually have a connection to these chronic diseases. But we don't treat it the same because it's different, because it's what we're eating, not just, one thing that we're doing every day. So I think bringing that aspect to our food choices could be really powerful for teens.
Yeah, and I love in your documentary you talk about some of the pernicious influences to the scientific medical societies that
Yeah.
we look towards for our advice. Maybe you could talk about a couple of those. It's fascinating. The American Diabetic Association, the American
Yeah.
Heart Association, the American Dietetic
Mhm.
Association. What's
So
going on with those? Yeah.
it's absolutely crazy. I mean, one of my favorite ones that I learned early on when I was reading was that the American Cancer Society accepted a $1.9 million fund from Coca-Cola, which I understand they've accepted funds from a ton of different companies, but at a certain point, the actual organizations who say they're responsible for solving the chronic disease that they are supposedly researching how to treat should be held responsible for whether they are accepting money from the companies that have actually been linked to the disease they're trying to prevent. Because it's just completely unethical on so many levels for them to accept that fund. So then I was like so confused by that for a long time. And you see examples of this with the American Heart Association, all of these different organizations where they've been accepting funds from Coca-Cola, from Kellogg's, even Procter and Gamble getting involved, with our research behind whether fat is actually bad or not, which everyone thinks it's bad. It's not bad, but people were trying to blame fat for the fault of sugar in the 1950s, and that's affected us all the way up until now because the sugar industry paid Harvard researchers to publish a paper in New England Journal of Medicine. I know you talked about this in your book as well, and it totally influenced how we eat for the next 50 years, and no one's talking about it until now, which is crazy. But unfortunately, it goes to show that these organizations themselves too, they've almost are too far gone in the idea that whatever effect food has on these diseases is so minuscule compared to what they believe is the North Star for research, which is genetic and DNA impact, all of that kind of stuff. And so when they believe that that is the sole cause of these things and where all of the golden nuggets are hidden for cures and stuff like that, they don't spend any time or any funding towards actually researching how we can maybe use things like the ketogenic diet as an intervention for cancer or stuff like that. So even if people, they'll say to me, they're like, Grace, are you saying we just stop that research? I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. Why don't we maybe split the funding 50-50? We have like zero going towards prevention right now. Maybe we could actually start spending some time on that, because that would mean that we could prevent the diseases before we even need to find a cure for them, these kinds of things. But we just are stuck in this wait and see approach when it comes to medicine that I think it's really hard to break. And I mean, I loved how in Outlive, Peter Attia actually talks about how we're kind of shifting out of the second age of medicine towards the third age of medicine, which is prevention focused, and trying to get early detection of these things and trying to have more of a holistic approach to healthcare. But we're so stuck in this second age that, contained germ theory and antibiotics and these great things that were good for short conditions that we had, but were not meant to fix these chronic illnesses. So, yeah.
Yeah. How has the response been to your film? Like, you're out on social media. I know you're reaching a lot of people. Anything surprised you about the responses, or what did you learn from that process?
Yeah, it's been really crazy. I mean, I've been shocked just by the amount of people who have commented and said, Grace, this was amazing. I showed it to my kids. That gets me so excited because I really, really care so much that my generation just hears the truth. Even if they decide not to make a change, they have the right to know what they're putting in their bodies and how it's going to affect them, not even in the long term anymore, in the next like 20-ish years is how it's looking now for us. I mean, when you look at non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, obesity, 1 in 5 of us has that. Even early onset cancer, it's just hitting us earlier and earlier now. And everyone's so shocked, articles keep coming out where doctors are super shocked by this. But when you look at the research that we have right now on metabolic health and how it's connected to these diseases and how ultra processed foods and excessive consumption of refined carbohydrates can affect that, then it's just like everyone deserves to know that that's at least an option. So those are some of my favorite comments. Some of the more exciting stuff too is that I have been invited onto some really cool podcasts because of this. I recently was on The Spillover at Turning Point USA with Alex Clark. That was so fun. I loved getting to talk to her because she just has a great podcast that I've been listening to for a while, and she's really into big food. So her and I went at it. And then I also, I've loved getting to talk to so many incredible doctors and professors who have been reaching out to me via DMs, and they're just like, "Hey Grace, check this study out," or "Hey Grace, thought you'd find this interesting." I'm like, "Yes, give me more," because I don't plan on stopping. Like I barely touched the surface with my documentary, and I want to keep going. I didn't even get to cover glyphosates and all of the issues with kind of agriculture now in America as well. So expect more to come from me, but just
Well, there's
just know that I love when you reach out.
a lot of work to be done. Yeah. And I love thinking out of the box, like your petition for bringing back, getting rid of seed oils in fried foods, which is a huge deal.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that at least one, I'm surprised that at least one store isn't taking that up, or one brand isn't, because they could carve out and be the non-seed oil fried foods and see what kind of response they get, because there's people, more and more people are aware of this. What kind of response have you gotten with your petition? Any traction with that?
Yeah, I have. I actually have been lucky enough to meet with one of the owners of a new restaurant in Austin that is super cool, and they're very open to actually getting rid of these seed oils. And so I've been kind of putting together a plan of how much it would cost them to actually commit to using some more stable oils, whether it's extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, or even I love Zero Acre Farms, their oils as well are great. And so I think that's actually going to be something that I roll out with them. So I'm very excited about that. And we'll be posting more in the future once we decide to, add that to the menu. But that's been one thing. It's also, I have loved getting to pair up with Dr. Kate Shanahan, because I mean, she's the queen of these seed oils,
Yeah.
and she got top restaurants in California to remove them from their menu. And so I think just I want to continue to promote her work, because this is what she's committed her life to. And it's very evident when you see, all of the incredible research and just how good she is at communicating this idea to people now. So, I mean, her book, Dark Calories, is coming out soon. That is going to be really, really interesting. And I'm excited about that. I think I have the link to either pre-order that or one of her books on my website, Cancer or Food-Borne Illness, if people want to check that out. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, and they could probably get it on Amazon also for to pre-order if they look under Kate Shanahan. She's amazing stuff, and they can pre-order that until your book comes out when you haven't started working on it.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, what let's say money was no object and you had benefactors. What would you like to do? Dream big. What would you like to do in the future, and what are you planning in the future? I know college is coming up this fall, and that's going to take your time too, but what are you looking forward to in this space for yourself?
Yeah, right now, my number one goal is to continue to spread this message to my generation, as I've shared before. I believe it's my job to cut cancer cases in half for them. So I'm going to keep working at that. And what that's looking like right now is expanding onto TikTok. So if you follow me at Traveling Genes on there, you can see bite-sized video content of me just explaining kind of the corruption behind some of these big food companies, as well as releasing small snippets of the documentary. But I am also building my first app, which I'm really excited about. And the app is basically going to have a couple of different features, two of which are one where you can screenshot or take a photo of the food that you're eating, and it'll tell you an estimate of how many cigarettes that would be equivalent to inflammation wise, which is really interesting visually to kind of show teens that idea. And what inspired me is when I read a study on how the amount of acrolein in one large order of French fries from a fast food restaurant can have the equivalent amounts to 25 cigarettes, which kind of was like crazy to me, because I mean, I always thought, that's like that seems so toxic, but it just goes to show how awful these, French fries are when they're cooked in these oxidized polyunsaturated fats. So kind of having that visual factor, but then also there's going to be a lot of cool posting features where people can update on whether they're doing a protest, a petition, or even just a boycott of one of these big food companies, or even they're replying to the dietitians who were paid off by General Mills on TikTok, and they're trying to say, this is bad advice to say that you can eat this cereal every day. That kind of stuff. I want there to be a place where teens can actually congregate and talk about it. So I'm excited to kind of get that going and see whether teens really start to think more about what it is that they're eating.
Yeah, it's such an exciting space, and it's great having your voice in it because I think it's a unique new perspective that needs to be heard. So that's great. Well, listen, I'm so excited. Everyone is about to see your documentary here. We're going to start it right as soon as we go off here. So, but before we go, could you list your website again? You mentioned it before, but mention it one more time for everybody.
Yeah, I kind of have two, but one of them is cancerfoodborneillness.com and the other one is travelinggenes.com, and both of which you can contact me.
Great. And you're very active on social media. So that's
Yes.
it's a super thing. Well, thanks for spending this time with me today. And we talked about, we want to get you back when my teenage daughters can join also, because they have some questions for you, and we want to hear more about your projects going forward. So thanks again, Grace, for the wonderful work you're doing, and thanks for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And now, please enjoy the documentary Cancer, a Food-Borne Illness by Grace Price.
My name is Grace Price, and I am filming a documentary. Right now we're waiting to see if any of the people in the reserved spots at the Whataburger headquarters are going to come out for their lunch break. So I have a quick question for you. Do you work for Whataburger? I'm really concerned about the health of my generation, foods that y'all are using.
I'm not getting on the video.
I'm sorry, I'm running late for it.
Okay.
Ladies, how are y'all doing? Have we been having some concerns about y'all recording? This whole area right here is Whataburger, the Whataburger home office.
What are these fast food executives also afraid of? I'm just a teenager making a documentary about... Cancer is greedy. Cancer is deceptive.
The current idea that cancer is a genetic disease is based on ideology, not on the science any longer.
Cancer is frustrating.
We have so much control over our health, and it comes down to diet.
Healthcare and medicine is extremely siloed.
Cancer is deflating.
We spend 40 times more on cures for cancer than researching prevention.
Our American society doesn't care about prevention.
If you could do anything at all, Joe, what would you do? I said I'd cure cancer.
Cancer is the monster hiding under all of our beds, waiting to creep into our lives.
In 2020, I had about 150 patients with cancer.
12 days after the diagnosis, my mom was dead, and that is truly a preventable unnecessary death.
I have also lost someone to cancer. My grandpa Hank was the life of the party. He could always put a smile on your face, even if you were in the foulest of moods. Unfortunately, when I was in middle school, I actually remember the exact day when it occurred because I had just gotten back from my soccer practice and my mom sat me down and she said that my grandpa had been diagnosed with cancer. When my mom delivered the news to me, I could tell that just from the tone of her voice, there wasn't much we could do. It was actually around a week later when he ended up passing. Just like that, my grandpa was gone. I felt extremely confused and frustrated because I knew there had to have been another way we could have seen it coming. Did the doctors truly try everything they could? Was there nothing that I could do to impact whether I would develop the exact same disease in my lifetime? Why was it that you could only consider options to make it better once he had already been diagnosed? These questions are what drove me to research and chase after the cure for cancer. For those of you thinking, who even are you? I'm Grace Price. I'm 17 years old and I go to a high school called Alpha. Through learning on AI applications at my school, I'm able to learn twice as fast as the average high school student and finish all of my schoolwork in 2 hours in the morning. This opens up time in my afternoons to work on an extremely ambitious project that you're about to learn more about. I've always been passionate about health. In fact, when I was little, my parents showed me the documentary Fed Up, which was basically about how excessive amounts of sugar in the foods that we eat every day have actually led to America's obesity crisis. This created an entire new world of understanding for me and what health could really look like. I started learning all that I could about the amounts of sugars that were in specific foods that my friends and I were eating every single day. There's 65 grams of sugar in this bottle of Coke. I might as well show you another comparison while we're here. This orange juice was an old favorite of mine. I used to drink about 1.5 glasses of this every morning. Instead of my normal fixing of orange juice, I might as well have just drank a bottle of Coke. This obsession continued into high school. However, it wasn't until my junior year when my entire understanding of health changed. That summer, my dad introduced me to a topic I'd never heard of. It was called epigenetics. Epigenetics is the inheritable chemical alterations to our DNA that are reversible and impacted by our environment. Now, in much simpler terms, you can think of epigenetics as little tags that have the power to turn a gene on and off, just like a light switch. You can think of our DNA as the script and our epigenetics as the actors deciding exactly how each line should be read. The most incredible thing about epigenetics is that the changes are impacted by our environment, unlike our DNA, which is permanent. Our epigenetics are impacted by lifestyle factors such as sleep, air quality, exercise, and most importantly, diet. In fact, the food that we eat can cause epigenetic alterations that can lead to cancer proliferation. I decided I was going to find the prevention and cure for cancer through the connection between food and epigenetics. I started spending every day reading at least 2 or 3 articles in the afternoon on the topic. I would then summarize this information and share it on Twitter. I had to share the good news with people. This new understanding of health could change the world. The average American adult consumes around 17 teaspoons of added sugar each day. This is 2 to 3 times greater than the healthy amount. What this means is that we are gaining less and less nutritional value from our food and are eating more refined sugar than ever. Most people eat food with nutritional labels they can't even pronounce. However, this is luckily an easy fix because we just have to start eating real food again instead of someone else's science experiment, right? When you Google future projections of cancer cases, a lot of the sources that come up are positive. For example, the CDC flaunts a decrease in mortality rates from cancer. The National Cancer Institute has endless articles on the amount of progress we've made towards finding a cure for cancer. Even President Biden seems to have a positive outlook on our future for cancer.
I said I'd cure cancer, and we can. We end cancer as we know it.
However, the first couple of months of research didn't go as expected. As I read more articles, it became crystal clear that there was never going to be a cure for cancer. At least not in the way that the National Health Institutes were selling it. What would you say the #1 cause of cancer is?
That's an interesting question.
Oh, I have no idea, honestly.
I'd say genetics.
Genetics.
Isn't it inherited from genes and stuff? So I would think that's the #1 cause.
Yes, I would say cancer is a genetic disease. Typically, if your parents have it, you're more inclined to have it.
Coca-Cola whistleblower and TrueBed co-founder Callie Means joins me.
The biggest problem in the country is the fact that we let ourselves get fatter, sicker, more depressed, more infertile at an increasing rate while bankrupting the country. Our institutions, particularly the healthcare industry, has completely let us down.
I was born at 12 pounds, and the doctor said to my mom, that's perfectly normal. And then a couple years later, she had trouble losing weight. She was obese, and they said, that's normal. 50% of people your age are obese, no problem. A couple years later, she had high blood sugar, put on metformin. A couple years later, had high cholesterol, put on a statin. A couple years later, high blood pressure, put on an ACE inhibitor. So you look back, in the 20, 30 years after I was born, there were all these siloed rites of passage for an American patient. And even going to my birth, she wasn't told this at the time, but a large baby, it's called pheomacinoma, is a high indicator of metabolic dysfunction for the mother. My own birth weight was a sign that something wrong was going on in the root cause. My mom, who, by the way, even on 6 medications, was an average patient. The average person her age is on more than 6 medications. She was actually called healthy by her doctors at 71. And she was taking a hike with my dad and felt a pain in her stomach and went in to get a scan. And she was told the next day that she had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 12 days after that diagnosis, my mom was dead, and that is truly a preventable unnecessary death. Now the doctors, the top oncologists in the world, who she was talking to at Stanford, said that this was unlucky. But the key point, I think, in this story, and that's relevant to millions of people, is that it wasn't unlucky. There were warning signs for 40 years. Why are the cancer societies, the American Diabetes Association, accepting money from products, from Coca-Cola, that's literally causing the uptick in these conditions? I think it's because there's no understanding and just a willful denial of the link between food and illnesses, which is really convenient. You hear these wealthy people say, oh, I've got the best doctor in the world. Bragging that you've got the best doctor after you get heart disease, after you get cancer, that's like bragging you have the best mechanic after you totally crash the car. Everyone just jumps into action. You cancel work, you're gonna battle chemotherapy. Where's that mindset before the car crashes? Why have we gaslighted everyone to be fighting once it crashes, but not ringing the alarm bells before?
Where else but in the fountain where they serve ice-cold Coca-Cola?
In the past, the American Cancer Society has accepted a $1.9 million fund from Coca-Cola. This is with the knowledge that the overconsumption of sugar can lead to increased risk of obesity and cancer.
There's nothing like ice-cold Coca-Cola.
Not only is this completely unethical, it also reveals that there is a deeper incentive behind these large health organizations than one would expect. The American Heart Association accepts funds from Kellogg's and Coke. The American Diabetes Association accepts funds from Coke. The list goes on. The easiest way to understand why certain products are promoted as healthy is to follow the money. Foods that increase cancer risk also increase risk for other chronic diseases. When we are younger, we are taught that illnesses and diseases are all different and not related. But I've come to find that this isn't the case. This is when I started reading about all of the foods that increased risk for the most chronic diseases. None of these foods were that surprising or complicated.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, it starts with the nutrients that you're putting in your body. So most people now are coming home from the hospital with Boost or Ensure, and they're seeing this as like their ticket to health. And it couldn't be further from the truth. These kind of things are filled with garbage oils and loaded with sugar. Sugar's often the second ingredient. And sugar, we know, is fueling tumors.
So I know that you earned your clinical doctorate. I was wondering how often nutrition and lifestyle factors were brought up when you were earning this degree.
That's a good question, and the answer is kind of sad. Healthcare and medicine is extremely siloed. For example, when I was in graduate school, we spoke about nutrition for about a half a day. And I want to compare that to, taking an entire semester of pharmacology, to help understand like what kind of drugs our patients are taking. So it's not enough.
While my conversations with Callie and Dr. Lindy were extremely informative, I felt as though I had even more questions than before. I decided to take my mission out of state, so I flew to Orlando, Florida, seeking answers from someone who's been researching the intersection of nutrition and diseases for a long time.
Dr. Kate Shanahan joins us now. She helps the Lakers eat better, and now she wants to do the same for you.
You say don't buy low fat, don't buy low cholesterol, don't buy fat free.
So these are the books that we've already written.
As a family medicine doctor, I was practicing in Hawaii, and I had gone to medical school because I wanted to get to the root causes of, selfishly, my own problems. Because as an athlete in college and high school, I had recurring connective tissue problems. I got every kind of itis. I got bursitis, tendonitis. I felt like there had to be a reason. And so I really hoped to learn these kinds of root cause explanations when I went to medical school. And nothing like that happened. I was a little bit sad and disillusioned with the actual practice of medicine itself, because I felt like giving people drugs for their blood pressure and just monitoring their kidney function and looking at their blood levels of cholesterol and giving them drugs for that, it didn't keep them out of the hospital. It wasn't improving their quality of life. So I was totally desperate for a solution. In the book, Spontaneous Healing, there was a term that was a biochemical term. It was essential fatty acids. I dove into the biochemistry of these essential fatty acids. When I did that, I realized that I was already getting a lot of them, and they were really so prevalent that maybe I was getting too much. And I also recognized that they were biochemically unstable. And this was where things got really interesting for me, because I was like, this is really important. It's not something I was taught in medical school. Doctors don't know anything about this biochemical stress. And I think it might be making a lot of these chronic diseases so prevalent right now. It's really a very simple principle. It's just that it's so abstract. Unless you're a chemist, and also unless you're very familiar with how the cell is built, especially with the fact that the cell membrane is built out of largely polyunsaturated fatty acids. It's like, doesn't mean anything. And this is where, unfortunately, most health professionals are. The few times that I've actually gotten some, national press, it was very easy for the folks from Harvard and Tufts to come flying in and correct the record and basically say, there's nothing wrong with polyunsaturated fats. The problem is that we don't care enough about our health, and then the usual talking points, it's all our fault. The way we go about nutrition science is actually not as scientific as just looking at the chemistry. And it turns out that a lot of chemists warned that vegetable oils, which are high in these polyunsaturated fatty acids that make us sick, they warned in the 50s and 60s that these things were not something we should base our diets on. They warned that they have a tendency to interact with oxygen, and that could be really bad. They warned that they could even cause things like cancer, believe it or not, and they warned that they could probably cause heart attacks and strokes. But doctors don't have a clue, so they completely disrespected all of that. Who was in the right here? Was it these chemists that nobody's heard of, or was it Harvard and the American Heart Association?
It would be like eating this many grapes.
You may be wondering, why is this happening and how is this even legal? Well, it all started back in the 1980s when the USDA and HHS created the first dietary guidelines for Americans. Refrigeration was all the rage. These national health organizations were being funded by the exact companies that were pushing for the use of industrial oils as cooking oils, the elimination of fats in foods, the addition of refined sugars to make up for the awful taste of fatless foods, and of course, the chemicals in our dinner. Carbs were great, but fat and protein needed to be limited. Studies were funded by these companies to show that foods in their natural forms are more risky than the science experiment companies call food nowadays. 95% of the 2020 U.S. Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee had a conflict of interest with the big food and big pharma. Greater than 60% were research funds and affiliations with executive boards. This is how nutrition misinformation trickles down from the government to doctors and then to us.
That many normal cells have all these same kinds of mutations that never develop cancer. We've spent billions and billions of dollars on the Cancer Genome Project. We're funding millions of grant dollars throughout the whole system and all the top cancer centers. Immunotherapies are based on the somatic mutation theory of cancer. So when you put all that together, it's too radical and painful or upsetting to an entire industry to say that you might not be doing the right thing. The problem is the field has not yet come to know this. The cancer field is still wallowing in hunting for gene mutations, and that's not the correct theory. The outcome is never going to be optimal. You have to know there's two aspects here. One of them is management, which most people are interested in. The second part of your question is how do we prevent us from getting into that in the first place? And that's, you got to keep your mitochondria healthy. So it's very hard to get cancer with healthy mitochondria. Our American society, and perhaps other societies as well, doesn't care about prevention. Because if they did, there would be no obesity epidemic. But there is. So that tells us the society doesn't really care about cancer prevention. Just what can you do for me after I get cancer? Every now and then you could have a treat and eat one of these things, or a pizza or whatever. But if you eat this stuff constantly, you're going to put yourself at risk for systemic inflammation, which is going to lead to damage to mitochondria, and you're going to then fall into fermentation, metabolism, cell division out of control, and you can get radiation, chemo, immunotherapies, something that will cause your body to be brutalized. When you see that cancer is getting worse and worse and striking earlier and earlier, and it's now going to replace heart disease as the #1 killer of people. I can't believe how many people in their 35, they just started their families. Right? They've got 3 kids and they're all little kids, and the woman has metastatic breast cancer, the guy's got metastatic colon cancer or something like this. Obesity has now replaced smoking as the #1 risk factor. It's all a big money game. And it's dollars first, patient outcomes second. It's so scary that the folks that are treating patients are almost clueless as to the very biology of the disease they're treating. Consequently, have all these dead people. It's like brutal death. Your body is wasted away, your hair falls out, you're bleeding from everywhere, you're surgically mutilated. I mean, this is nuts. This is completely nuts. We don't have to have that.
I had reached a crossroads. Everything I had learned was simply too much to just forget. However, if I decided to follow what my research had found, it would mean that I was going against everything I had ever known about cancer and diseases as a whole. It would mean that I would have to accept the fact that sometimes my doctors might not be telling me the whole story, that our current pharmaceutical system profits more off of sick people, not healthy ones, that nutrition is still one of the least valued aspects of science, and worst of all, I would have to accept the actuality of our country's health. We are sicker than ever. My journey led me to realize it's about making conscious choices in our lifestyles, especially in our diets, that can impact ourselves positively. Just as I learned that epigenetics isn't a distant concept, but something we can influence through our everyday choices, so is prevention within our grasp. Did you know?
If you are enjoying this program, please hit that subscribe button, or even better, leave a review. Your support makes it possible for us to create the quality programming that we're continually striving for.
Can I start? Is it recording?
It's already recording.
Oh, sorry. This is for general information and educational purposes only, and it's not intended to constitute or substitute for medical advice or counseling. The practice of medicine or the provision of healthcare, diagnosis, or treatment, or the creation of a physician-patient or clinical relationship. The use of this information is at their own user's risk. If you find this to be on the value, please hit that like button to subscribe to support the work that we do on this channel. And we take your suggestions and advice very seriously, so please let us know what you'd like to see on this channel. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time. You should say that.
You like it? You want to do it one more time, or is that good? I think that was good.
Yes. You need to save the recording.
Very good.